Whether you're looking for a quiet table for two or hosting a large crew, Peacock Alley is the place to be in downtown Bismarck, and a proud sponsor of Plain Talk, North Dakota's #1 political podcast.
I mean, we're trying to get people to actually listen to this podcast.
This iconic grill and bar is where Bismarck history, delicious food, one-of-a-kind drinks, and big ideas come together. Peacock Alley, located on the corner of 5th and Main, downtown Bismarck.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right?
So today we're going to talk about something that everybody likes to call NDIRF, which sounds like maybe it's a child's toy that shoots foam arrows at somebody, but it's not. It's actually kind of sort of an insurance company. It's called the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, and it's an exercise in what is called self-insuring, which essentially, if it's an individual or an organization and they have a lot of money, they can essentially create a pool of cash and insure themselves or indemnify themselves against liabilities. And so in the state of North Dakota, back in the 1980s, the various local governing entities, and here I'm talking about cities, counties, park districts, school districts, they created what's called the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. And it's self-insurance. They put together a pool of money, and if they get sued, say a garbage truck sideswipes your car on the street, or somebody slips and falls outside of City Hall and they file a claim, it goes through the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. Now, recently, the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund was NDIRF, which I'm not gonna call it that. We're just gonna call it the Reserve Fund, because NDIRF I don't like very much. They recently came under scrutiny by the North Dakota Insurance Department for a review, and even getting to the point of a review was a little bit of a fight. There was some resistance to it. The legislature had to step in during the 2023 session and make it explicit in the law that North Dakota's insurance commissioner, who's currently John Godfread, has the authority to essentially audit the organization. He's done that audit. The Legislative Audit and Fiscal Review Committee, which has another fun acronym pronunciation, LAFRC, reviewed this report, and the findings were eye-opening. One of the members of the committee is Representative Austen Schauer. He joins Chad Oban and I today to talk about it. And Representative Schauer, first of all, I just want to start. You had some strong words during that committee hearing. I believe one of the quotes was, you called this, borderline or nearly criminal, and basically said that this reserve fund, in your opinion, was really, kind of sticking it to citizens. Tell us a little bit about this report. Give us an overview. What's going on here?
Well, nice to be here today, Rob and Chad, and nice to be in front of a camera. I used to be in front of a camera when my face was younger, but not anymore. Also, the NERF, you don't like NDIRF. Did you happen to read the Fred Cox, the longtime kicker for the Minnesota Vikings? Maybe Chad remembers him. He invented the NERF ball. Did you know that?
Seeing line, and I would jockey in that.
Rob, I'm going to have to call it NDIRF, just in honor of Fred Cox. You called that report eye-opening and LAFRC last week. It's been last week now. I found it to be absolutely stunning and horrible, just horrible. I thought it showed callous mistreatment of claimants or people who've been victimized, no fault of their own. And the way that the NDIRF executives and team handle those claimants, to me, was unbelievable. I've got a 33-page report. Page after page after page after page. And I'm thinking, and I have not been following this. If you would have asked me what NDIRF was prior to that meeting, I don't know, as I had not been following it at all. And so I'm thinking, okay, the executive director is going to get up there and he's going to go boom, 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 boom. He'll give us the other side. As a former journalist, I try, okay, both sides. There was no other side. When the executive director from NDIRF got up there, he gave us some pushback to Representative Mike Nafee on a flooding, a water issue. And that was pretty much it. And that report had been available for 6 weeks. And to me, if you got a report that is just heavily criticizing, blasting your organization, don't you think that you would come back and point by point by point by point? But it wasn't there. And basically it was, this is the way we do our business. And then afterwards, the executive director said, well, we need to educate. We need to educate the lawmakers. We need to educate people. This isn't about education. This is about callous treatment of people. Little to no response, denial after denial. 71% of third-party claims are no. The response is a form letter. The response is a template on rejection with no details. It's basically blaming the victim. The victim has to prove that you were victimized. And there's example after example after example. The adjusters, one adjuster was being, I don't want to say glorified, but being applauded for doing 3 adjustments a day. So I'm not an insurance guy, but how do you do 3 a day if it's not just rubber stamped? And then the oversight. Where is the oversight? You tell me, where's the oversight? There's no oversight. To me, it was disregard, disrespect for people, and in some ways, an abuse of public dollars.
So, Representative Schauer, I actually just watched the hearing right before we got on here, and I want to invite you to play poker with me sometime, because watching your body language during that hearing, it was very clear how you felt about it.
And you would win a lot of money off me, wouldn't you, Scott? And that's what it's all about.
There you go. There you go. Reading the report, watching the hearing, and I think your assessment is very right. But I know that there's people sitting out there reading that article and saying, wait, an insurance company is automatically denying a claim? Where's the news here? I mean, we see it in the private sector. We see it with WSI. We see it with NDIRF. Why is this different than just sort of people's attitude that the insurance companies are in the business of denying claims? Why is this different?
Well, it's, first of all, you have a 33-page report, the audit. Did you read that, Chad?
I did not read it. I watched
Okay, so don't ask that question until you read it. You read that report. And I asked specifically, Mr. Arnold, is this an example of best practices or worst practices? And he said it's not best practices. Okay, so we've got an issue there. This is an audit. This is an examination. This isn't just my opinion or somebody else's opinion. That's number one. Number two, on the private sector, the commercialization, if you have a bad situation with your insurance company, your insurance agent, what's the first thing you do?
I call the insurance agent or call the insurance department.
Or
just settle.
Or you just switch insurance companies.
Sure.
What's that? You can't do this here.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say monopoly, but there's no other way to go. What's the appeals process on this? There's no appeals process other than you hiring an attorney. And a couple of attorneys reached out to me after NDIRF, and they said that, well, I'll quote you on this. Say, in my experience, NDIRF, and this is a good attorney here in Fargo, NDIRF lowballs claimant with the expectation hope that they will not pursue the claim further. When counsel is retained, NDIRF arrogantly takes its position and hides behind the statutory caps on damages. Our law firm has had several significant claims against NDIRF, and the outcomes have not been reasonable, fair, or adequate for our clients. And you guys know about the Michelle Comer lawsuit, and she's lost, she says, up to $600,000, and she has the ability to be able to sue. So
And let's put
it's a problem.
let's put some meat on the bones of some of this. And first of all, I want to say I wrote an article about this. The headline was local government's insurance fund has been gouging North Dakotans. And I embed the entire insurance department report in that article. So if people want to read it, it's there publicly on the internet. And I would also encourage you to watch the hearing, which is available on the legislative website. Referring to Michelle Comer, she is the former commerce commissioner, although this happened after her tenure working for the state. She was just opening her business. She had bought a building. And it's mixed use. So the bottom level, as I understand it, is for her business. The upper level is for her private residence. And a water main broke, and it flooded her business. And basically she was told that her claim was denied. She didn't do anything wrong. The city's water main broke and flooded her business. She says it's done $600,000 worth of damage. She's suing. She says her elevator, by the way, still doesn't work to get up to the second floor. And I got to tell you, I mean, can you imagine if you had to do business on the second floor? I don't know if you'd be able to open, because how can you make it accessible to disabled people to be able to get to the second floor? So anyway, there's a whole mess there. There's a whole lot going on here. And one of the things that I think to make clear is that, and Representative Schauer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read the report, it made it very clear to me that there is a different standard depending on who the claimant is. If the claimant is a member of the fund, which is to say a local government, their claims don't seem to get nearly the level. In fact, it seemed to be literally a defined philosophy for a time where they didn't want to nickel and dime their members, so therefore those claims are settled quickly. But if you're a member of the public, your claim more than likely is denied. So it seems like they're treating themselves very, very well, and if you're a member of the public, you get the short end of the stick. Is that right?
Well, I can only go by what the report, the exam, the audit said. I mean, statistically, that's correct. You know, the motive behind it, the decision making behind it, I can't comment on that, other than what the report said. And like I said before, when you have over 70% of third party claims are a definite no, and that's much higher than first party claims, it begs the question why.
Well, isn't there an element, because you said basically the appeals process is get a lawyer. But the problem with that is, I mean, if you're just Joe Blow and the garbage truck sideswipes your car or something, and now they've denied your claim, okay, well, now you have to pay for your lawyer. You know, how many North Dakotans have the resources for that? And oh, by the way, the people you're up against is the government, who have effectively limitless amounts of money that they can throw at litigation. So, I mean, basically, it's like, okay, you don't like it, now you got to fight City Hall.
Well, Rob, it's even beyond City Hall, because a legislator that I talked to even this morning, she gave me two examples, and she's very legitimate. She said there was an accident involving at a swimming pool in the locker room. And you know, in the smaller communities, the swimming pool doors into locker rooms, they're like walls. They're not really doors. You know what I mean? You walk in, you take a right or take a left. So one of the walls had not been constructed correctly and fell, and this kid broke his arm really bad. And the city said, yeah, definitely our fault, definitely our fault. It goes to NDIRF. No, it's not. Prove it that it's not. You prove that we did something wrong. Okay, that's a legitimate example. Another one was a bus hit a kid, and the school district said, yeah, it's our bad, you know, we'll settle. And NDIRF said no. I mean, these are legitimate cases where this organization is denying proper procedure to make people whole. Insurance companies are there to make people whole. So we have a problem, and we have to make sure we correct that problem. To me, it's first and foremost oversight. Either we privatize it, we give it to OMB, who had no interest in it at all, or we make it a state agency, or that someone else comes up with another idea. I don't know. But we have to have the oversight, because you cannot do this to people. You can't. I'm sorry. I mean, to me, there was in Isaiah this morning for devotions, Isaiah 5:7. It says, the question is, why did Isaiah focus so much on the issues of justice? It says the Hebrew word for justice refers not only to legal matters decided by court, but also to all matters of right behavior and proper treatment of people. God is concerned about all human behavior, right and wrong, in our personal lives, family interactions, neighborhoods, general society, and so on. Government should be the same thing.
So, Austen, I was, watching the hearing. The oversight piece is the one that sort of was jarring to me. Like, there seems like there's absolutely no oversight right now. NDIRF didn't want the insurance department at all. They didn't want this audit to be done at all, and I think we now know why after hearing about the report.
Yeah, I should note, and I don't want to speculate as to motivations, but I should note that the former CEO of NDIRF, fought the accountability. Finally, in February of this year, when the insurance, after having gotten explicit authorization to do so from the legislature, the insurance department began their audit. A month later, that CEO resigned and went into the private sector. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, and it seemed to me like even when you asked the question about, what can we do here? There wasn't really good answers for what the legislature could do to help solve some of these problems without doing those sort of big reforms that you just mentioned in terms of moving it to OMB or those kind of things. Are you sensing from your colleagues? You certainly were not. I mean, it seemed like everybody in the committee was in the same place with their frustration. Do you sense the legislature is going to move in a big way come January to get this under control? Because I think anybody who saw that committee, it was jarring at how poorly they were performing.
I think we're heading in the right direction. Rob, I saw your story. You did a really nice job. Appreciate you having me on today. I don't feel as though I'm maybe the right person because I'm new to this issue. But to answer your question, Chad, yeah, I think we're going in the right direction. I know the governor elect Armstrong knows about this. To be honest with you, I think it's going to be a test of his leadership too, that he gets involved and he makes sure that this is taken care of. What the answer is, I don't know. There needs to be an appeal process. Some of the other organizations, agencies, you have an administrative judge. I know that's a little bit controversial, but there has to be an appeal process, not, Rob, go call the attorney, and even with Michelle, if she wins in court, I mean, how much will she win? So there has to be a better appeals process. To me, if looking back on that committee hearing, if the executive director would have gotten up there and said, "You're right, these are issues. Here's our plan. Here's our detailed improvement plan. We need to do boom, 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 boom." That didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. So obviously we've got a problem of opinion here. And then the last thing too I want to mention is the board makeup. The board makeup is all political leaders. So what do you got here? I mean, you got the foxes guarding the henhouse. So you have to have at least one or two legislators on there, somebody maybe from the executive branch, I don't know, one or two consumers on there. I don't know the size of the makeup of the board or the size of the board, but there has to be something there as well. And I would like to see, I don't think it's going to happen. I would like to see a window. I would like to see a 1-year window where if people have been harmed, in their opinion, they've been harmed over the past 3 years or 5 years, you can't go all the way back. They have 1 year to put their claim forward again, and then the organization who's ever running will take another look at it. That's my thinking.
Somebody from the legal community too might be good for the board. Certainly, and I don't know, maybe they want to entangle themselves, but like you, I got several calls from attorneys after my article ran, from people talking about their experiences with this, and it's not good. What about, and I think we're all on the same page about this. But the other side of this is remembering that this fund is created by tax dollars. What's in that fund are tax dollars coming from local governments. And we just had, and we continue to have, a rip-roaring debate about property taxes. And so I haven't heard anybody make this argument yet, but you can kind of see it if somebody were to try to defend the status quo, and I would not want that job. But if somebody were to try to, what if they argue, well, okay, but if we open up the door and we start paying out all these claims all the time, that's going to push up your property taxes because that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's got to go into this fund to pay out these things. What about that argument? They could say, well, we're saving the public money. And this is me playing devil's advocate, by the way. I don't believe in this argument, but I have a feeling at some point that may be part of this debate.
I need to take my blood pressure medication before we answer that question. We're putting money ahead of people and their lives. What kind of thinking is that? What have we become? I mean, if there's a legitimate claim, you pay it, and if you have to increase the premiums, you increase the premiums. And this is public dollars, and there has to be transparency involved in this. So I don't want to hear that argument of property taxes. So I'm trying to stay calm here, Chad. Your colleague is pushing me.
Well, yeah, he does that. He does that to me all the time.
Lord, I know.
I want to talk about, so the director of NDIRF did come up at the end of the hearing. You made the point that, there's a little bit of pushback, but no real plan. He hasn't been in that job for very long. Were you surprised, or were your colleagues surprised or disappointed that You'd think sometimes when there's a change of leadership, there might be a change of different approach, but it did seem like the plan is just more of the same. Was that your takeaway, that there isn't really change happening with the new director of NDIRF?
I can only say that the new director of NDIRF has been with the organization for several years. I would have to double check on how many years, but he's been there. He was just moved up to that position. It was not somebody that came in from the outside. Maybe, Rob, you know the details.
I only know that he was previously the head of the claims department.
Head of the claims department.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see much change, Chad.
Yeah. Well, part of when I was watching the hearing, my perception was they're reacting this way, or maybe they're blindsided this way because they don't see that there's a problem.
Right.
That was part of it. I think maybe they think everything's okay, or thought everything was okay. I hope they don't think that now. I wish they didn't think it then if they did. That was my perception.
But let me interrupt you just for a second there. Let's think about this a little bit. So you have a 33-page report that blasts your organization, your people, basically your business integrity, 33 pages. And then you come up and you have the idea that I don't really agree with it, but what do you do with it? To me, the first thing you would do is say, okay, we need to get better. Boom, 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 boom. Thank you so much. Even if you don't believe it, you say, boom, boom, boom. But here it was, we just ignore it. We don't even acknowledge it. So that tells me that someone that does not even understand that you have to give the other side of it, I don't want to use the word arrogant, but is somewhat not self-aware that you have to make some changes. Completely unaware and not self-aware. So that to me is like a double dipping issue. You didn't agree with it. You need to be logical to boom, 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 boom to take the heat off. It wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. So to me, it strikes at, even a deeper problem that maybe we even think we have.
I think sometimes, with your background in journalism as well, sometimes you find the most brazen behavior, because I don't know that anybody, we started out joking that you didn't know what NDIRF was. Until I started reading some stories about, Michelle Comer's situation and others, I didn't really know what it was either. And I think that might be part of the problem here is nobody was paying attention. Nobody was looking at this. There wasn't scrutiny, not from the media, not from the public. Even now, we had to explain what NDIRF was to start this interview to make sure people are up to speed, because most people are never going to interact with this organization. But, and I think that's the problem. I think that's what allowed a lot of this. And not that anybody was wrong for not paying attention to the ins and outs of NDIRF, but, bad things happen in the shadows. And this was kind of in the shadows.
But this is all dealing with public dollars.
Yep.
That's the issue. If this is on the private side and you're contracting out of business, something like that, and they're doing this or that, and you got a 2-year agreement with them, a 2-year contract, a 3-year contract, you review it after 2 years, after 3 years. This has been going on, like you said, since the mid-1980s. So, and I'm sure they've done a good job in certain areas, but this audit says they're horrible at what they're doing. So now we have to figure out what to do as leaders of the state.
Well, and I think, the John Godfread and his department deserve some amount of applause here, because I don't think this would have come to light if it wasn't for them insisting that they have the ability to do this. Did you see any flaws in their report? It sounds like they did a pretty thorough job, other than not getting to 300 cases instead of 299. But
that was terrible. Godfrey must have just, the clock stopped and said, "We're done."
We talked about that before. People were wondering what that was. We were talking about OCD before we were recording, and how they went to 299 and not 300.
But is there anything else you would have liked to see them dig deeper into, or do you think the report was thorough? 33 pages, pretty thorough.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for John Godfread. I really do. I've told him this specifically. I think he should run for governor someday. He would do a great job. I've seen him. I've only been in the legislature 6 years, but I've seen him multiple times testify. He's always well prepared. He's articulate. He's honest, and he's tall. What else is? But he did a great job. I thought Arnold, his deputy commissioner, did a really nice job of just presenting the facts as best as possible. I'm not trying to be accusatory, but here's what the exam says. So I think they did an exceptional job. I think and maybe you would know this, Rob, from a statutory position, that the insurance department can't take over NDIRF. I think there's a conflict of interest there, and maybe they don't want to take over.
I don't think because they're a regulatory body. I don't think that they can also participate in the activity that they're regulating. So
Right.
we would have to put it under, we'd have to organize it some different way, but it can't be under the insurance department. And I think that's appropriate. I think that's right because, for the same reason, I don't want the auditor, running the agencies that it audits. The insurance department has a function here, and thanks to, again, I'll add to the praise for John Godfread. He pushed this issue. He felt, I think, even before the legislature acted, he felt they had the authority, but NDIRF pushed back, and they had to get the legislature to make it explicit. But kudos to him. Why wouldn't we just turn this over to the private sector? Why wouldn't we just do a situation where the local governments or whatever get or even if they wanted to pool together and get one big contract, maybe that makes sense. Why not? Is this not a place that the private sector wants to go?
Well, you have so many political subdivisions, so many city councils and townships and counties, et cetera. So to me, it would be difficult. I would like to have it privatized. I would like to have like a 3-year contract, and then you can review it after 3 years. I think that would make a lot of sense. I've always liked self-insurance. I know in West Fargo, they do self-insurance for their school district, and it's worked out well. So I don't think necessarily the self-insurance is horrible. I just think it's the way this organization has been run. So, but as far as what to do and, the contracting out, I certainly would be open to that.
How much blame the local governments deserve? Because when I look at when you go to the NDIRF website, you can look up their board of directors. It's Association of Counties, League of Cities, which by the way, given how the public currently feels about their property taxes, and then you find out that on top of that, they've, if you file a claim, the deck's stacked against you, basically. That's a toxic political situation. But how much blame? The count. This is their organization. Why weren't they providing oversight? Was it just they were, do whatever you got to do to keep the premiums down? Was that their attitude?
I really can't comment on that. I could maybe speculate a little bit. How many of us look at our different funds, investments, as long as the bottom line is fine, we just kind of keep on going. Maybe a lot of the political subdivisions didn't really know what was going on. So I really can't comment on that. All I can comment on is on that 33-page report. It's damning. It's absolutely horrible, and we have to make sure that we fix this problem. That's it. What's happened in the past is gone. We only have today and the future, and we just have to move forward and find the solution.
Does NDIRF need more staff people? Like when I'm thinking about that report and they're just sort of rubber stamping denial or doing the letters to people with no explanation, it seemed to me like people who are just needing to churn out stuff really quickly. If I was the executive director of NDIRF, that's one of the things I would have talked about is that, we have to be efficient, and that's why we're sort of half-butting this stuff. Do you sense there needs to be more folks doing this work?
And let me just interject, because one really odd thing, and I don't know if people know this, once upon a time, I did insurance investigations as a private investigator.
Right, no one's surprised by that. You're just out there getting denying claims. Well,
He is the guy that was three times.
No. Well, I'm the guy who would show up to find out if somebody was actually injured or not. We could talk about my colorful career in another episode. But one of the things that really shocked me is when the insurance department was scrutinizing claim files, they weren't finding photographs, they weren't finding police reports or interviews,
justice reports,
nothing. And to me that's shock. As somebody who's very familiar with claim reports, and you get it and you open it up and there's basic things that you expect. Photos being number one, like somebody's car gets hit, that's the first thing you do is you take photos, you take video, you document it.
So let me interrupt you, Rob. Why do you think that wasn't there?
I don't know. Maybe they didn't feel like they needed to. Maybe it was laziness. Maybe because we're just denying everybody anyway, and nobody can ever win against us. So maybe we don't need to keep it. Why do the work?
Well, going back to Chad's question, I think it's a culture issue. I think it's leadership from the top and on the way down. I mean, that was because if the adjusters aren't doing their jobs, I mean, you guys have had accidents. You know what it is when they come out. At the adjuster, you can send the pictures. You can do this. I mean, they do a good job. They want to make sure that they retain your business. But so when the adjusters aren't doing common business practices in the world of insurance, whose problem is it? Is it the adjuster? Yes, but it's somebody who's watching the organization. It's the top people. It has to go back to the top people. They will set the culture of the organization. That's the problem right there.
I think that's kind of the qualified answer to Chad's question is to do it right. Would they need more staff? Maybe, probably.
We don't know.
I think the answer to the question was they had enough staff for the way they wanted to do the job. That's how I'm perceiving it. Anyway.
Logically, I agree.
Well, Austen,
there was not any request unless I missed something for more staff in that hearing. Did I miss something?
No,
you did not.
I didn't hear it either. Well, we're gonna stop the interview there. Representative Schauer, thank you so much for coming on. And I realize, this is one of those things where it's an aspect of our government that you're probably not ever going to interact with. It's not like the DMV or the post office or something. But the thing is when you do have to interact with it, it's a big deal. It means somebody got hurt. It means somebody's property was impacted. It means economic impacts that are, potentially very, very significant. And so if you're put in that position, it can be you think of how life-altering that is, where maybe you sustain a life-altering injury and then you can't work, or medical bills or what have you. And then on top of that, your government essentially says, tough luck, we ain't paying. And if you don't like it, hire a lawyer. And
right, there's people who are at the other side of these claims.
Right.
It's not just a claim number. It's human beings whose lives are affected pretty dramatically.
And not only that, Chad, there's a certain loss of dignity. When you're mistreated, it's almost like a bully type business. And so then you carry that, and that's not healthy, and that shouldn't be. So we got to get that fixed.
Yep. Well, we're gonna stop there. Representative Schauer, thank you so much, and we're looking forward to see how this issue plays out.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Hey friends, we've got a new way for you to participate in the show. You can now call us or text us with your questions, comments, or anything you want us to discuss on Plain Talk. Just give us a call or shoot us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. It's super easy. Leave your message, tell us your name and where you're from, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Again, like I said at the end of that interview, there was. This is not something that you're probably going to experience, but when you do experience, it can be it can change the trajectory of your life. And if we're not, one of the quotes that Representative Schauer says is that, the point of insurance is to make people whole, right? Like if they have a valid claim, then they deserve to be made whole. And if we don't make them whole,
I tell you what irritates me most, and like I said, I didn't watch the hearing until this morning, like right beforehand. But arrogance is a good word. But I also think, like, watching Mr. Arnold go through that whole report, government's failing here. And I think that NDIRF makes other agencies look bad. It makes government look bad. People are looking for reasons to say government is bad, and NDIRF is just handing them another reason. And that irritates me for all the good employees who are working their tails off in all these other agencies. The bit about what's in the files and not in the files, you said it right. That's unbelievable. How do you deny a claim without having documentation of the claim? So how do you accept it without having documentation?
So I talked a little bit to Michelle Comer about her situation with NDIRF, and obviously she's got ongoing litigation, and obviously she's one side of it, but she said, as far as she knows, nobody visited the site where the water main broke and flooded her. Nobody came and took pictures from NDIRF. Nothing. She said she'd be surprised if a claims adjuster even visited the site. And to me, I mean, what does that say? That means that they don't have a decision that they need to inform because they've already made a decision.
And what there's no way to, to come back and appeal the decision. You don't have to be able to make the case to anybody. So again, why would you need all this stuff? And I hate how much we were talking about how good John Godfread is, but seriously, kudos to their department for being all over this thing.
And out and putting in the work over. They tried prior to the 2023 session to do this. NDIRF wouldn't play ball, so they went to the legislature. They got explicit authority to do it, saying, nope, you're going to do this, and they have the authority to do this, and then came back and produced the report. Good on them. And by the way, that's the counterpoint. NDIRF is an example of government working bad. Right. The insurance department, is it working good? That is what it looks like when people are doing their job and they care about doing their jobs, because it would have been very easy to just shrug your shoulders at it, not do the work.
They don't want to give us this stuff.
And most of the public wasn't paying attention to this. Which I know how hard that is too. Where sometimes what you're trying to make, when I'm writing a story and I'm trying to make the public care about something that they're not paying attention to, and I feel like I just have to hit them over the head with it, like over and over again. Like, you need to be paying attention to this. It's really hard.
I mean, we've talked in previous episodes, like, things may not happen often. I think you used the example of somebody losing their home through property taxes. Yeah, it doesn't happen that often, but if you're the one, it's a big deal. They may not a lot of people have to interact with NDIRF, although I was shocked at the amount of claims that they process. Seems like a lot.
But a lot of them, I mean, you think of how many schools, how many city halls, how many people could slip and fall, or how many garbage trucks are out there driving the streets every day, and they slide on the ice and they bump. Not every claim is like a life. Sometimes these are fender benders, but
right. Or street sweepers who are throwing stuff up and hitting a windshield.
You're a family living paycheck to paycheck, and a garbage truck slips into your car. And now you can't drive it, or it's got $1,500 worth of fender bender damage or something to it. That's a major problem for this person.
And even like some of the claims that they were accepting, but would only pay 70% of it because the car had depreciated in value. Well, the bumper still costs the same amount, and so you're having to eat 30% of that. It's not a good. And again, I think to your point, is the goal just trying to keep the premiums low? I don't know. I mean, I know people on the board that I like very much and I trust very much, but I think it's also just sort of things are going fine. And so we'll just let things continue going.
Was the board paying attention? I don't know. I don't have the answers to those questions, but I know what's been revealed. And boy, is it ugly. So the test and that was something I thought Representative Schauer put very well. We can't change the past.
Right.
We can control what we do in the future. So how are we all going to react to this?
Well, and I think Schauer did a nice job of the frustration around when the staff person stood up and basically didn't own any of it, or like Schauer said, at least just, if people feel this way, just agree with them at the podium, say some things that you're going to do better. But it seems to me they just poured fuel on the fire and made legislators even more angry about NDIRF by standing up there and basically saying this is not a problem.
Well,
not good strategy.
I think NDIRF is an organization that has gotten very comfortable without a lot of people paying attention to it. Right. And now suddenly, I don't think maybe they were prepared for how much people were going to pay attention to this one.
Yeah,
and they certainly did.
And let me be, NDIRF is very important, right? I mean, it does protect political subs in situations because things do go wrong. Insurance is very, very important, and we do want premiums to stay low. So I don't think we should just be willy-nilly, handing out dollars to everybody who files a claim. But the stats were pretty clear in that report that there's a propensity to just deny something that comes in and then just see where it goes from there. But you and I both know that WSI has that same reputation of deny, or it used to. Haven't heard anything recently that back in the day, deny a claim and then make people prove it, right?
Yeah, that was the era I was an insurance investigator doing when we had a contract with workers' comp. So
Yeah.
I know all about it. And by the way, I wasn't involved in like claims decisions or anything like that. I was sent out to gather facts that we then presented to them. They made the decisions.
You were following the guy around who hurt his back, who was playing a softball, right? Those kind of stories.
Oh yeah, I had somebody one time who had a claimed. I mean, because so one of the tactics we would do is um we would actually schedule surveillance right around the time they go to the doctor. So when they go to the doctor, this is when they make all their claims. Oh, I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't stand up. I followed a guy. He'd gone into his doctor, and he said, my knees are so bad from my injury, and I can't stand up. I can't do this. The next day, I videotaped him on a stand-up jet ski for like 6 hours of riding around on a lake. So, I mean, there are fraudulent claims out there. It is a real thing that happens.
So how did the creeper you just videotaping some dude for 6 hours on the lake?
You have no idea how I mean, the thing is too, it was summer, right? I'm sitting in a hot car doing this. Yeah. Yeah, that's something.
No, you should have got your own jet ski and just followed him around.
We did that one time. We followed somebody on a snowmobile trip down to Deadwood, and we literally I literally snowmobiled behind them. Yeah, we did that, something similar to that.
Wow.
We just
Gracious.
we could do a whole show on that part of my career. And it was fun, and it honestly it felt good. People who were defrauding, because that's the other side of the coin. That's not good either. That drives up premiums for everybody. It was a lot.
But in that case, how much money did they spend investigating to deny it? What was the cost benefit analysis for the state in a
pretty
case
good.
like that?
Pretty good. We had reports on that, and it was pretty good. I mean, the amount that they paid us to do the investigations, because a lot of times by the time they got to us, these were big. These are like people who are going to be like lifetime disability type.
Sure.
So they were going to get big lump sum money. And to be able to prove that they were fraudulent saved significant amounts of money.
And you weren't charging much because you were essentially going on a vacation to the lake and down to Deadwood.
It was not a vacation at all. I will tell you, surveillance is so. I don't know how we got off this, but if you imagine, like one time I was watching somebody, and it was like Friday, and I was thinking this person's not going anywhere. So I'm like anybody else who's on Friday. I think I'm going to get off work. I'm calling a couple friends from my cell phone, thinking, what are we doing tonight? You want to go out and eat or whatever? And all of a sudden, this person comes out, hooks up, starts putting camping supplies in their back, and they took off. I ended up not being prepared at all, following this person to Montana on a camping track. And you think about it, like how do I gas up? Like, how does that person, how do I keep this person from noticing me as I'm following them from gas station to gas station across western North Dakota and eastern Montana?
So your only training in that was that your dad did similar work?
Yeah. He was a Alaska State Trooper, so he was a homicide investigator. So he also worked for a while for the Alaska Railroad, doing investigations. So yeah, I mean, yeah, but we did internal training. We go to conferences and things like that. But a lot of it, even when I was a little boy, my dad would point things out to me. He's an amazing person. We'd pull up and be like, yeah, those people over there are doing a drug deal. It's just like, he just has a sixth sense for these things. It's unbelievable. Anyway, these are not the things that we were supposed to be talking about. We're supposed to be talking about insurance. Although one interesting segue from, obviously, I very much feel like what's happening at NDIRF was an attempt to keep costs down for local governments. Yeah. I just don't know whatever their motivation there could be. And I don't even know that that's a bad motivation. It's just they went too extreme with it. But, talking about keeping costs down for local government, that was something, Governor Burgum's been kind of doing a round of interviews, outgoing governor. He's governor for what?
2 more days till Sunday, I think.
Kelly Armstrong gets sworn in on the 15th. I think they're doing a ceremonial swearing in today, but the actual date's the 15th.
Okay.
when
Yeah.
when
So
it
it's
takes
Sunday.
over. So it's a matter of not much time left. But yeah, by the way, I'm working on getting him on the show. I hadn't asked in a while. And part of the problem is I asked his gubernatorial staff, and they were like, "Hey, it's not our problem anymore." So I have to I just got the email from Mike Nowatzki, so I gotta ask somebody else. We're gonna
Yeah, Nowatzki has moved on to getting Kelly on the show.
he's now in the Armstrong administration.
Right.
Yeah, our problem with Kelly might be keeping him off the show sometimes.
Yeah, isn't there some rumors that he might be co-guest hosting while we're on vacation? Are we not willing to break?
You may have let the cat out of the bag on that one. I don't know. That's being worked on by our over the break. Chad and I would be taking some time off. Jessica Bell's going to be sitting in and co-hosting with her. Maybe Kelly Armstrong. We'll find out.
That the only way to replace you and I is to have the governor replace him. Jessica knows.
Yeah, she knows. We'll bring in a couple of ballers like that. The governor of Jessica Bell, man. We'll be careful. They'll start their own podcast and beat us.
And just kick the crap out of us.
Yeah. So, but one thing that I really thought was interesting, Burgum saying, is that he regrets the interplay between local governments and the state government over property taxes, where the state government's been basically trying to buy down property taxes, and he wishes he had taken more of a stand and told local governments basically live within your means. And I got to tell you, that was music to my ears. I have been singing that song for years, saying that these buy downs don't work. They don't work.
And maybe they don't work, but at the same time, who's the state to tell local governments what they can and cannot spend? Maybe stop sending them money, but you can't.
And I think that was his argument: is stop enabling it and tell them, no, it's your budget. Figure it out.
Well, let's say the same thing about the state. I mean, that many people at the top of state government complain all the time about the feds spending too much money. Why didn't the state stop taking money from the feds?
Well, I don't know that that's. I mean, if we object to the federal government running $1 trillion deficit, we shouldn't take highway money.
Well, I mean, I just think that, I mean, like, we heard a lot about inflation being caused by the federal government overspending while continuing to take their ARPA money and all these different things. Sure. I've always thought that if the legislature is so concerned about DC spending, they should stop taking the money from the feds. Some states did that. Some states said, no. Would I do that? No, that's stupid. I mean, we want free money. But you can't, on one hand, complain about federal spending while showing up at the press conference spending federal spending.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to be critical of the scale of federal spending while also approving of a specific type of federal spending.
Yeah, we hate federal spending that goes to the other 49 states, but god darn it, every dollar that comes to North Dakota is well spent.
That's not entirely fair. Like, I think the federal government obviously has a spending problem. So, but that being said, I don't think we should stop spending on highways and bridges, including those in North Dakota, wherever they are. I think that highway infrastructure is important for the whole country. So, which is always the bugaboo when we start talking about spending, is it's fungible. So, which spending do you want to cut?
Right.
It's tough.
So what did we want the cities and counties and school boards to stop spending on?
To me, it's not about the state coming down and telling the locals how to spend their money. The state is saying, basically, that interchange between what you spend and what you assess needs to be settled at your level. And so stop coming to us if your constituents think their tax bills are too high, they need to come to you. And then you can explain, well, you wanted pickleball courts, you wanted a new school, you wanted whatever it is they've been spending their money on, instead of coming to the legislature to solve the problem. Because that's the other part of the other side of the coin is, well, local control. Okay, great. But you got to have local responsibility as well.
Sure, but if you're only giving them the ability to control their budget based on property taxes, because they can't implement an income tax, they can do sales tax. But I mean, so at the state level, you completely,
and they can do fees and stuff like that.
But at the state level, so we're completely eliminating income taxes. Stop sending money down to the cities and counties, and then you're going to be like, why are property taxes so high? I mean, like, state spending on things that are paid for at the local level by property taxes absolutely should lower property taxes. So if you're going to do that, and I think we're going to see it this session, I think they should continue to do that and then just cap how much raising there can be beyond that. I mean, I think that's rather than just saying we're not going to subsidize the state anymore or the political subs or whatever. I don't think that does much. I mean, all that does is raise, and not to mention the state also tells, school districts that they have to have so many mills in order to get the state dollars, and they then cap how school districts can pay. Like it's easy on the way out to say, yeah, political sub should have spent more money or less money, and I wish I would have done something about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
And I guess because when I've had he and I've actually had direct conversations with him about this. And so when I read those comments that he made, I perceived it as more, this is a local problem and local governments need to address it. Now, is there a role for state to be doing reform? I mean, what you just talked about where, having the state take over more and then capping, that's essentially the Louser plan that we had on to talk about, which I think has a lot of promise. I'm very interested in that. Because I think you're right. But, it's been, I think the locals have been getting away with a bait and switch for a long time, where they get all the credit for the good spending that people like. But when people are upset about the property tax bills, they send the problem to Bismarck. And Bismarck and the fools in the legislature over the years have taken the bait, and got baited into backing themselves into a corner.
yeah, and the legislators, I mean, the problem they have is when they're out knocking on doors, they're hearing people complain about property taxes, and the voters are saying, "Hey, you do something about property taxes." Voters don't like the response of saying, "Well, it's somebody else's problem," right? That doesn't land very well. They just want property taxes to go down. And so I think legislators are in a position where it's like everybody's frustrated with property taxes. We've got to do something. And they've tried to do something. It hasn't worked to the extent that they want it to do. So, I mean, from that perspective, I sort of agree with Berg.
Yeah. And again, I perceived his comments as saying, maybe if I had gotten up on my bully pulpit and helped educate the public about, if you're shouting at your legislatures, you're kind of shouting at the wrong people. By the way, please don't shout at anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Please be constructive. I was
Nice.
talking figuratively. Basically, I perceived it as saying, I wish I had helped shape the debate so that it was different. And I really, really agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that, just like even last session, the push and pull between income and property taxes between the two different chambers, and and the other problem is our income taxes are too low. So not too low, they're so low that people will complain about income taxes. So like his idea, and I think Hedlund and others, to get rid of the income taxes, people aren't passionate about that. People are like, hell yeah, I want to save that $128 I paid in income.
But their argument is, if we want to deliver tax relief, income tax is a tax the state assesses.
I understand that, and I think it goes back to we're agreeing that it's not what the public feels, and so you have to connect a lot of dots for people to say, hey, I eliminated your income taxes, so therefore it should offset your property taxes. All that does is shift people's mindset to being more mad about property taxes because they're not paying other taxes.
I do feel like the focus of this legislature is going to be more on reform, and it's going to be more on putting the ball back in the court of local governments. And I think about time, because I remember even going all the way back to when we had Governor Hoeven, and we were doing like an income tax, state income tax deduction for property taxes. It was being administered by Tax Commissioner Corey Fong, back in the day. And I remember even then saying, in fact, I remember I was at an event. It was like a chamber event or something, and Corey Fong was speaking. And I asked him, I said, well, isn't that just a shift? I mean, we're allowing this. We're basically, the state's just paying. How does that solve the property tax problem? And it was just dead silent in the room. I remember this. And somebody at one of the tables was like, awkward. But I mean, it's always been a shift. And I just, if you want your property taxes to be lower, then there's some local government meetings that you need to start showing up to.
So I think you're right that I think this all started, I think it was the 2006 race between Brent Edison and Corey Fong, where Brent was going after Fong really hard for property taxes being too high. I think politically Fong had to respond.
So it's Brent
And
Edison's fault. Is that what we're?
well, no, I mean, I think Brent Edison identified the issue of property taxes and used it politically smart. But then Corey responded saying, okay, the legislature, the state has to do something about property taxes. And I will say Democrats for years have been saying if the state just funds all of education, that should bring down property taxes. I'm not so sure that actually is the case in reality over the past 30 years or so. But I think there has been this going back, I mean, that's damn near 20 years ago, where the ball was put in the state's court because of politics. And I don't think it's ever left the state's court since then.
And again, that's how I perceived Burgum, is maybe he could have done more to put the ball back. And maybe.
But I still go back to local spending. I mean, what do you not fund?
Well, it depends on which locality we're talking about.
Right.
Maybe that's true where you live in Burleigh County in Bismarck. Maybe it's not true in Minot in Ward County. I mean, that's, or maybe in Ward County, maybe the county's doing a great job, but the park district, and I'm picking things randomly here. I'm not picking on our park district, but you know what I mean? I mean, it depends on where you live.
But and I think one of the things that frustrates me about sort of the disconnect between what we're paying for and the services we provide, like in a town like Bismarck where it's exploding, right? I mean, the geographic footprint of Bismarck is so much bigger, but the infrastructure around snow removal or those kind of things is not keeping up with that. So then the services we all get from the city, we're not plowing our streets as fast because there's so many more streets. And then people get frustrated with the city and the city sucks. But we're making decisions that don't allow us to do things as efficiently. And I will compliment Doug Burgum. If we'd focus more on walkability scores and density, government would be a lot cheaper.
That was the first meeting I ever had with Doug Burgum was in his offices in Fargo, and he was thinking about running for governor at the time. And I got a 3-hour PowerPoint presentation about walkability. But the arguments that he made were eye-opening about lane miles and the amount. I mean, every time we add a new development on the outskirts of town, those are more miles that a snowplow has to drive every time. So that not only means eventually going to need more snowplows, or accept that your street's going to be cleared a lot. Not it's going to take longer. And it's going to cost more. And every time we do that, and I think, we're not assessing the cost of that correctly.
Or we build a school on the outskirts of town, and I've heard him talk about, you build a school on the outside of town, then people build homes around that, and you're expanding and you're expanding and expanding the footprint, and that stuff costs more money. It's not just building a school. It's how do you do the snow plows? How do you keep those streets cleaned and all those different things? So I think there are some things we could do more efficiently, but most North Dakotans like to have their half acre, right? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, there's some choice involved in this.
Yeah, well, it's a preference thing. That was kind of my pushback. I think I wrote an article one time where it sometimes felt like Doug Burgum wanted to design our communities like gerbil cages. And it's like, we'll put the exercise wheel over here and we'll do this. And Americans generally, and North Dakotans specifically, don't want to live like that.
Right.
And also the sort of people who want to live in dense urban environments leave North Dakota
to go live in dense urban, and
they move to Minneapolis or Chicago or New York or places like that. So, that's some of it's cultural. But the thing is,
the reality is we should understand the cost that's associated with.
That was one of, when we had Gary Emineth on and we were talking about, he was talking about eliminating the property tax from residences. But that's one of the things that scare me, is I think we're already too insulated from the interplay. I don't know that we're not insulated from the cost, because eventually it's all coming out of our pockets one way or the other. But I think we're insulated from the interplay between what we pay in taxes and what's spent, or the decisions that get made. And I am very much, I like the idea of getting prices, right? When I go to the grocery store and companies change prices around, I change my shopping habits around. Maybe sometimes the prices are okay, or maybe sometimes I choose a different brand, or I start cooking different meals or something. We're not doing that enough in government. And to a certain degree, you can't, right? You can't shop around for a government, but there needs to be like a cost benefit thing. Like, you need to understand your tax bill went up, and this specifically is what it paid for. The more we can do that in government, the better.
Right. Yep. No, I agree 100%. And again, thinking about all the talking we're doing about property taxes currently fund a lot of things that most North Dakotans want in their community, the things that make our communities great. And I think are there things that maybe we could do a little bit differently to make it more efficient? Possibly. But guess what? I want a library. I want parks. I want schools. I want safe roads. I want police officers.
Yep.
Those are things that most people would agree they want in their community.
I think it's about understanding what you're paying for and understanding that this is the bill for it. I think that's it. But, we're in a very populist era right now and people are mad. I mean, this insurance, when I talked about the insurance issue with NDIRF that we began the show with, and I called it, toxic politically. One of the things I was thinking of was the insurance industry guy who was just killed in New York. So, that's kind of where the world's at right now is people are mad and to a certain degree. And I don't, nobody should be getting murdered, but I understand why people are mad.
Right.
I understand why people are mad. And it's situations like this. It's,
And I think Schauer bringing up like the story, I heard the same story about the kid who was in a facility where the wall basically fell on their arm because it wasn't well done. And the city said, we screwed up. This is our mistake. And then NDIRF denies it. Or the school, like the incidences where the local political sub is saying we did wrong. And then the insurance company denies it. I can see why people are really, really angry about that.
Yeah. Well, and probably they should be. So, but not so angry that you hurt other people. That is never justified. That's evil. And by the way, if you want to start, just one last comment on that. We have to be very careful about the sort of things like we're saying, oh, I'm happy that he does justice and you're treating these people like they're Bonnie and Clyde or something. If you change the rules of the game, you got to remember the other side's going to start playing by those rules too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we've talked about with January 6th.
Once you open the door,
both teams are going to do that.
Once you open the door, everybody starts doing it, and it's terrible. Okay, we're going to stop there. Coming up next week, we actually just booked a guest. We're going to have on Christina Sambur from Gender Justice. We had Representative Murphy on about his abortion bill, which I think is going to be a very fascinating debate, given how abortion politics have been reshuffling at the national level. I think it's going to be a good test of where are we at here in North Dakota. But we're going to see what her organization, she's very much on the, obviously on the pro-choice side of that debate. So we're going to see where that issue's at. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it as always, and we'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
I need to take my blood pressure medication before we answer that question.